Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the itemization changes and the support tier list for the new season, patch 14.1 for League of Legends. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. It's usually most nights starting around 11:30, typically going until about 1. I might try to start getting on a bit earlier, maybe 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, going until 1 o'clock. We'll see. But I should be able to stream most nights, at least for 2 or 3 games. And I'm going to try to bring you guys more content like this in the new season. I know I haven't been consistent, really for the last half a year or so with the content, but I am going to give you at least a support tier list every patch, and I'll try to give you an ADC and maybe some more roles as well as the season unfolds. And I'll do some updated guides, particularly for some of the champions that I end up playing a lot. So obviously Rakan, but I might be trying some of these other champs too, and I could maybe do some updated individual guides for those. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I did talk about this maybe a few days ago on stream, what I wanted to do for the tier list, but my mind has changed because I did watch a couple of videos, and there were 2 things that I really didn't anticipate that weren't talked about enough in the just initial information about the patch. The first one, and probably the biggest one, and I went ahead and kept what I talked about the other day because I'll mention it again and how this scenario could play out, but I think these 2 changes are going to make it less likely. Number 1 is they're making lethality flat armor pin. What on earth? Now, are they going to keep this? I don't know. I suspect this is going to be incredibly overpowered, and they're going to nerf this because the whole reason they changed this back in the day is because it was way, way too strong, and the items were worse back then. Maybe they think that just with the current state of the game, with like some tank items out there, or just the way the game has been balanced, it's okay to bring flat armor pin back. But if you guys don't remember this, it's been a long time since they've had flat armor pin on items that was not lethality. I can't even remember. Was that season like 6 or something? 7? It was a really long time. So what they did back in the day, which has been this way for years now, is that they had scaling on lethality. So if you bought an item that has like 18 lethality on it, and you got it when you're level 7 or something like that, you weren't getting 18 lethality. You weren't getting 18 flat armor pin, I should say. Rather, you were getting something like maybe 10 or 11. So you only got the maximum number listed on lethality in armor pin whenever you were level 18, right? And now it is it's flat. So when it says 18 lethality, it means you are shredding 18 armor the moment that you get it, which is just incredibly strong. And I've got the PBE pulled up, and we'll look at some of that stuff. Well, we can just go ahead and look at it right now, because I think this is going to shape a lot of what I'm going to talk about in this video. So Sarah to Dirk has been really OP for a long time, even with the old school lethality that it gave the scaling lethality. But now it's even better. It's only 1,000 gold instead of 1,100. I think maybe they took down the AD on it a little bit or something, or maybe they took the lethality down a little bit. But whatever it is, it's incredibly strong right now. So the way that this is budgeted, you're only paying 125 gold for the 10 lethality. So that means lethality only costs, and this goes into almost all the lethality items. Brutalizer is another one that has lethality on it. And this is going to be like more expensive, like carry champion items. But honestly, a lot of carries are still going to get these cheaper items, most likely. But that means it's only 12.5 to shred 1 flat armor. Buying a piece of armor off of a cloth armor is 300 gold, or it's 20 gold, right? It's 300 to buy 15 armor baseline. So that means that it is incredibly more efficient just to buy flat armor pin than it is to buy flat armor. Now, you can usually get more armor on items than you can lethality on like the biggest items, but nevertheless, it's a losing battle from a value proposition. And the thing is, when you're getting lethality items, it's more likely you're going to be able to get kills, and then you're going to be able to get more gold and afford more lethality, and it just snowballs like that. Also, not every champion in the game wants to buy armor, right? In fact, a lot of them don't. So like AD carries, mages, Just anything that's not really a tank is not going to want to buy that armor. So they're just relying on their base armor, which is going to be a lot less effective right now. And many of them do not have very high scaling base armor. Like a lot of enchanters and ADCs, mages, all of these things have pretty low base scaling armor. So I think this is going to be incredibly disruptive to the ecosystem. I think that lethality is going to be king. I've seen these metas before. I think this was right before they nerfed the lethality last time. But it's just ridiculously OP. Like, you're going to see people getting one shot, like, super hard. I mean, effectively what this is going to do... I mean, like, 12.5 shred is basically, like, flat shred on a lethality item or something. Or 10, I should say, is like 10% extra damage. It's not literally that, but it's very, very close. It is a lot of extra damage. And as you shred people closer to 0 armor, where you're doing true damage, every little point of armor that you take off is more valuable than the previous point. I don't want to get into all the math around that, but it stacks extremely well whenever you get flat penetration. So what does this mean overall? Well, obviously, champions like Pyke and Senna are going to benefit from this big time, which we'll talk about. But it also, and probably even more important for the meta, it means that a lot of the champions you're going to see are going to be really high damage, snowball, early game champions. And if it's assassins, they're going to have really high mobility. You start seeing the Kha'Zixes, Rengar, the vampire girl, I can't remember her name, but she can build lethality. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's just going to be building lethality. And ADCs that can probably thrive with lethality, right? So you've got like Samira, Miss Fortune, Draven with lethality is extremely dangerous. Jhin can run lethality. So a lot of those types of early game just burst ADCs are going to be really good with lethality. And they changed the bottom lane as well over here. They changed 2 things on the map that are going to impact bottom lane. Number 1, they made top lane a lot harder to gank. So they put this little thing here, so it's going to be really hard to wrap around. Now, they did make the river a little bit bigger. So, you know, maybe people can wrap in here. But it's going to be a lot easier to cover this, because now you can just ward like this bush or whatever, and it's going to be really hard to get in there and gank that. So junglers that can jump over walls and things like that are going to have a little bit of an advantage, but that's going to make it a lot more difficult. And they're going to have to use one of their jumps, one of their cooldowns probably, to get over this wall, other than like Kayn or, you know, maybe Talon, things like that. But a lot of champs are going to have to use a jump to get over the wall. So, in other words, ganking top is going to be a lot less effective. Ganking mid, I've seen people speculate this is going to be a lot less effective because there are, like, more escape routes. There's an escape route on the left now. I think this could make it a little bit easier, potentially, to wrap around. You'd have to take tower shots, though, to come in and gank this. But people have said that mid is going to be a bit harder to gank. I don't know about that, but top definitely will be. But bottom is going to be easier to gank because they've opened it up to make it symmetrical now. So you've got a triangle bush over here, and you've got a tri-bush over here. So now they can wrap around on this side and gank too. And they added a little bit of a grassy area over here, so now they can come in behind you this way as well. Just like they can sort of over here with the golems. So there's going to be a party in the bot lane. In other words, you're going to be camped and ganked all the time because it's going to be so much harder to gank any other lane. So that's going to heavily favor champions that either have the mobility to escape ganks, or champions that just want to fight it out and can maybe win a 2v3, or can certainly convert if your jungler comes down in a 3v2. So you want really good, aggressive early game champs to pair with the lethality ADCs and all the jungle action that's going to be going on bottom. Okay, so the other things that I had mentioned here on stream that I'll kind of leave up, just because it could play out this way if there's not a lot of ganks bottom, or people figure out sort of counter picks to things, to the lethality meta, or the lethality just gets like hot nerfed, which is totally possible in 14.1, or gets changed for 14.2. So I'll leave it up here. They are implementing a True Skill 2.0 MMR system. So I don't know exactly what this means, but it's going to take your performance in a game into account, into how much LP you're gaining and losing over time. So they haven't said exactly what that entails, But easy stats to imagine that they would consider would be things like KDA, how much do you die, how many kills do you get, how many assists do you get. They could look at things like damage. They could look at vision score. If vision score is part of that equation for supports, which I would assume it probably is, then you're going to want to run Zombie Ward on almost everybody. It's a great rune anyways, gives you lots of extra vision just to help you win the game, but it's also going to increase your vision score stat a lot. So I don't know exactly what all that entails. I really hope, and this would be a lot of work, so I don't know if they're going to do it this way, but I really hope that they look at your performance compared to other people playing that same champion. If they're going to implement it, I think that's the best way to do it. That's one of the only balanced ways to do it. So, for example, if you're playing Zyra or whatever, they're going to be looking at how all other Zyras in your ELO bracket performed. So, you're Gold 2, they're going to look at all Gold Zyras and see how they're performing, and then look at how you're performing compared to those metrics relative to your damage, KDA, kill participation, team fight participation, vision score, whatever it is. Just look at Zyras. I hope they do that. If you're playing Braum, just look at Braum. Because the thing is, some champions are going to be obviously really good at doing specific things that other champions are not good at. So, for example, I talk about enchanters are usually really good at, well, maybe not in this meta, but in theory, they can be good at staying alive, especially someone like Janna, because they can hang in the back and just heal and shield allies, and they don't have to put themselves in harm's way. Versus someone like, you know, an Alistar or Leona or some kind of engaged tank is probably going to die more. So they may not have the strongest KDA because they go in with Alistar, they knock up one person to start a fight, you know, they walk around, they soak up a bunch of pressure. Maybe your team wins the fight, but maybe you only get 1 or 2 assists off of that because you have to actually hit people with Alistar to get the assists, right? If you channel your heal or whatever, I guess that would trigger it. But y'all know what I'm saying. It's just a lot easier for some types of champions to do certain things. Tanks are going to die more. Enchanters are probably going to die less. Things like Zyra, Lux, Xerath are going to deal more damage. I don't think they would look at damage, probably, for all supports. But that's just something to consider. So usually enchanters are very good at that. But someone like Pyke could be pretty good at surviving as well. He can start fights. If they are looking at vision score, getting Umbral is huge, because then you basically get 2 sweepers. You get your normal sweeper and you get Umbral, and then you're going to get more wards. With Zombie Ward, you can place deeper wards. If kills do actually count, you do get kills with Pyke, more so than most other supports, because it's encouraged to KS with your ult. So, I don't know. I hope that they look at that system, again, based on specific champions, but I don't know precisely what they're going to do with it. Okay, so who knows? So, lethality, armor pen, map change, we talked about that. They are adding some pretty good support items here, and I think this will be good on just about anybody, honestly. I was thinking it would help enchanters survive burst. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to be enough, but engaged champs can still use these things too. So they're changing the support items. I think really the only 2 you're going to see on the vast majority of champions are, number 1, Celestial Opposition. And this is the 1,000 gold support item, right? So when you get 1,000 quest gold, what they're doing here is you always have to buy World Atlas first, which gives you some, you know, pretty wimpy baseline stats. But now you have a choice in how you want to stack this up. Every 18 seconds you get a charge. So if you hit an enemy, then you're going to get 30 gold. I think it's 25 if you're ranged. So it's like a Frostfang kind of activation from the past. Or if you kill a minion, any minion, cannon minion, ranged minion, whatever, it's 20 gold for you. And whatever that minion is worth goes to the nearest ally. So you don't have to worry about hitting the cannon minion. Now, I will say, though, it does not say that it executes anymore. Now, I don't know if that's just untrue or what, but if it doesn't execute the minion, that's going to be really rough on champs that want to use it for that want to use the killing minion version of stacking this up. So that is probably going to favor ranged champions, so something like a Senna. that can actively do this, or champs that get a lot of AD. So if you're a Pike or something, you've got a decent amount of AD, you can probably last hit too. It's just like some enchanters may have a harder time last hitting, but they can probably land hits with their abilities. Anyways, that upgrades eventually to this Runic Compass, which again is kind of wimpy stats. And it looks like damaging abilities and attacks against champions or buildings grant some amount of gold. Obviously, that's glitched. This is on the PBE before the patch releases. And then once you get to 1,000, you get to choose one of these. Okay, so one of these, they all have the exact same stats. You still get some gold per 10, which is cool. So your gold, your passive gold doesn't just stop at 1,000, so that's nice to see. But this, you gain a base, it's almost like Aftershock. Whenever someone damages you, you gain a shield for either 35% or 25% damage reduction for, I shouldn't say a shield. You get 35% or 25% damage reduction for 2 seconds, and then whenever it breaks, it slows everyone around you for 1.5 seconds by 50%. Doesn't do any damage. But that's going to prevent you from getting blown up a lot, and it's got 20-second cooldown. So, could be pretty good on enchanters if they're trying to get assassinated, but obviously can be really good on tanks too. If you have that plus Aftershock, you're taking like 0 damage for 2 seconds, pretty much like an Alistar ult. So that's really good. That's kind of your defensive option. The more aggressive option that you might be seeing a lot, I think this one's probably the most OP if you can get away with it, is Solstice Slay. So whenever you slow or immobilize an enemy champion, you restore 120 health to yourself and the lowest nearby ally, and you both gain 90, it's decaying movement. I didn't realize it was decaying, but that's still really good. 90 decaying movement speed for 4 seconds. So you get a lot of speed for 4 seconds. You can really run people down and stick to them. So especially if you pair this with like a Leona or a Nautilus or just something else that wants to stick to them, particularly if you've got like Zeke's that's being activated on your ults, you get that full 250 damage. It's going to be really, really good. And for running people down, even something like a Janna, right? Now you have a way to sort of initiate where you can run up and W somebody and it's going to speed up, you know, someone else near you so you can hunt people down. Or you can use it to get away, right? You just hit someone with a piece of CC and all of a sudden you're both moving very quickly. You got a Malachi Seed, someone's chasing you, just drop a Malachi Seed. Whenever they run over it, it's going to speed you up and you're just going to sprint away. So, and it's on a pretty low cooldown too. It's like 20 seconds, I think. Yeah, so really, really good. Okay, let me see what else I want to say, and then we'll get to the actual tier list here in a second. I know it's a lot of preamble, but obviously there's a lot of changes. So those are the two big ones that you want to go. As far as enchanters, I will say that there's a lot of good items, and I think enchanters have some of the best items, but it's going to be overshadowed by the lethality, I think. So they changed Staff of Flowing Water to where it's now 10% movement speed is back. Ardent Censer got some major buffs to its aura as well, like 5 extra on hit, 5 extra percent. And then Morellonomicon is now 220 or 2200 gold, and it's got 90 AP and 15 ability haste on it. So that's nuts. If it wasn't for this lethality stuff, man, enchanters would be rocking. It's just the lethality is gonna keep them in check, which I guess is pretty good balance. Where enchanters are a lot more risk-reward, you definitely can die a lot against these lethality champions, but if you stay alive, man, the buffs are crazy. So here's Staff of Flowing Water. I mean, look at everything you get for 2,300 gold. And they changed it, again, to the 10% movement speed for 4 seconds. That's so strong. They nerfed this years ago when this item first came out. I think it was like Season 8 or 9. It used to give the movement speed, then they changed it to ability haste because movement speed was too strong. But you're giving your whole team... If you put like, okay, so what you do with this, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Font of Life, you take that, you apply a slow to somebody, it puts a debuff over their head if you don't know how this works. Whenever someone on your team auto-attacks that person, they get a small heal, which isn't a lot, but it counts as a heal coming from you. So when you like Janna, for example, you W somebody, it puts Font on them for, I think it's like 4 seconds. Then whenever anybody auto-attacks that person, then they're going to get this buff. Right? Now, you can trigger it also just with traditional heals and shields. You just cast heals on people or shields on people. But with Font of Life, all of your CC also turns into an opportunity to trigger this. So, it's very easy to spread this around to your whole team. The ability power is kind of whatever. It's good on some champs, bad on some champs. But everybody loves the 10% movement speed. It's huge. And just the 30 ability power on you personally. This is a 2,300 gold item that's got 70 ability power on it effectively in a combat scenario. And it's got ability haste, shield power, mana regen, everything. It's really, really strong. So I think if you do want to run an enchanter and you think you can get away with not dying, if you want to run Janna and you think you're going to have good warding and you're not going to die to the fed Kha'Zix, it's really good. And then Ardent got a few buffs too. I think they gave it 10 more ability power, if I'm not mistaken, and now it grants 25% attack speed instead of 20, and it grants 20 on-hit magic damage instead of 15. So again, super, super good. Same mechanism as Font of Life. And you can have both of these, because one is rapid, one is sanctified. So if you run both of these, you're just going to be like destroying people in a front-to-back team fight. If you can get away with it, right? Because neither one of them has HP on it. So you're going to get annihilated most of the time. Now, someone like Rakan can possibly get one of these because he can take Guardian. He's pretty mobile. He can kind of get away from some stuff. If he had to, I guess he could take Aftershock to try to survive Assassins, but really you probably still want to take Guardian. You know, he can get stuff like Tabbies if he really has to, or he could even pair like a Staff of Flowing Water with something like Locket or Knight's Vow. That might be what enchanters have to do, really, is just go for one of these items, probably Staff, and then get a tank item next. Get like either Frozen Heart or Knight's Vow or something. Locket, something to protect you. You probably can't go for like Glass Cannon, you know, 3 or 4 item enchanter anymore. So I guess that's interesting. That will create some build diversity and a little risk reward. The newer items they added that I'll just go ahead and mention, Trailblazer. So this gives 20 bonus movement speed, up to 20. You gain 5% flat movement speed, 250 health, 40 armor. This is not really worth it, I don't think. You're paying like 700 gold for the movement speed buff, and it's not as good as like Dead Man's Plate, which people have compared this to. Right? Dead Man's is 40 bonus movement speed, obviously bigger stats, and it does damage when you hit somebody. Right? So you've kind of got that proc damage. This, I mean, it is a lot cheaper, but it's also a lot less movement speed. Like, 20 bonus movement speed is not a ton. It's okay, right? But, I don't know. I think it's a bit of a trap. If I'm playing a tank, I'd probably rather just, you know, get a traditional tank item. Maybe on Bard, maybe on Maokai. You know, the usual suspects that would want Dead Man's might want this. Dawn Core, I think, is a bait item. It's just way too expensive for an enchanter item and has no HP on it. But, like, maybe a 4th item in a super long game. You could get some good scaling out of it. And then Thornmail, I think, is kind of a bait item, too. There are better Grievous Wound options out there. Although, I mean, it does have a lot of health and a lot of armor on it. So, you know, if you really need a big-ticket item that's got both of those, 345... I mean, it is going to be more than, like, Knight's Vow, which is probably the best support armor item. Although it is a lot more expensive, so you can decide if it's worth it or not. Obviously, Frozen Heart has the same armor on it, but it doesn't have the health. So, if you just really need to not get assassinated, maybe. But I think it's probably a bait most of the time. A couple of other notable changes. I mentioned Morellonomicon, extremely valuable anti-healing item, so that's going to be very good on any AP champs that want to try to counter enchanters, especially like Soraka. Shurelya's is missing the passive movement speed you used to be able to get just by healing or shielding somebody to get a little bit of extra movement speed, so I think this is going to be a lot weaker. Maybe Rakan still gets this, but I suspect a lot of champions are not gonna want to get this, especially because it no longer has HP on it. You're just gonna get lit up by assassins. Echoes of Helia does have some HP on it, so that's good. They changed it to where it does some healing now, in addition to some magic damage. So that's kind of cool. But I don't think there's going to be that many champs that get this. The usual suspects, you know, maybe Sona, maybe Nami. Champs that can either spam abilities or they get a lot of value out of that. Could be good, but not most champions. Moonstone does have HP on it, which is good. Obviously, Soraka's probably still going to want this. I don't know if there are a lot of other champs that would want this, though, especially in this meta. It does give you some survivability. Maybe someone like Melio, he has like an AoE heal on his ult. He's got some shields. maybe like Sona in some circumstances, but yeah, probably very situational. They did make Frozen Heart a lot cheaper at 2,300. They lopped 20 armor off to pay for that, which is cost neutral, right? It's 400 gold cheaper, losing 400 gold worth of armor, but it does make it more affordable. I wish they would tap down the mana cost, like maybe give it 80 armor and knock off like 200 mana. But maybe that's just too good, too efficient for a tank item. But it does give you the reduced attack speed. They did make it 20% instead of 15. I think they did that a while ago. And you do decrease all incoming damage by 7, which is pretty significant. I mean, if someone hits you for 100, that's a 7% damage reduction on that. So it's just auto attacks, not abilities. But that could be good if you're going to be getting hit by a lot of autos. If you are a primary tank, you know, a Nautilus or a Leona, it's going to be frontlining. That could be good. Locket doesn't have Consecration on it anymore, so you're not giving out the free armor and magic resist, so it is significantly weaker than it used to be. It also has less ability haste. I think it used to have 20, now it has 10. So I don't know. It is an okay anti-burst, and I think you'll see a lot of people just having to get this, like being forced to get it, because Redemption's just going to be too slow. It's a similar amount of healing and shielding. This is also not reduced by Grievous Wounds. So, Redemption is still good. It's basically the same thing overall. It does have health on it still, which again, a lot of these enchanter items don't. So that is handy. Imperial Mandate does more damage. You get 12% of you're dealing 12% of the target's current health. So on Nami, obviously this will still be good. It doesn't have HP on it again, which it lost the HP a while ago. I think it's just gonna be too risky. But if you're ahead or if you're Nami, maybe you get this. I don't know, 12% is a lot for early game trades. Maybe you could get this on Rakan or something, but again, I think if you can get away with it, the bigger contributor later in the game is probably going to be Staff of Flowing Water for the movement speed. But, I mean, if you can put this on a lot of champs like a Rakan, maybe that's enough damage. I don't know. Mikhail's does have the most HP. It has 250 instead of 200 like the other ones. It's got heal power, ability haste, gets rid of suppressions, everything except for knockups and suppressions. So it's still a pretty good item, but it's very situational in solo queue. Sometimes you cleanse somebody and they die anyways because they're like taking a drink of water, eating some Cheetos or something, you know, not paying attention. Abyssal Mask is basically the same thing. It's a little bit cheaper at 2,400. I think maybe it was 2,400 on live. I can't remember, but very situational. If the enemy has a lot of magic damage and your team has a lot of magic damage, it's good. I don't think that's going to be the meta, though. I think it's going to be a lot of lethality. People just like playing assassins, too, so you don't have to beg most people to play assassins. Like, even if they're not viable, people are still going to play assassins. So, anyways, okay. The assassin items, just really quickly, and then we'll get into the tier list that are most important. So the craziest thing is they lowered the price on, like, the 3 most important ones to, like, 2,700. I don't think this is live. I don't play a lot of assassins, but I think this is like 3,000 gold on live. I'm pretty sure. So they're making it cheaper, I'm assuming, because it's no longer a mythic, so it doesn't have like the mythic bonuses or whatever. But man, this thing is like extremely cost efficient. All of these are just nuts. Like Umbral Glaive, 50 attack power, 15 lethality, 15 ability haste, and it gives you a free extra sweeper. So this is what you're going to want. Probably rush on Senna and Pike. So I don't know. It's really, really strong. So that's probably your rush the vast majority of the time. This can be good if they have a lot of shields. I don't think that's going to be the meta. Again, they've nerfed things like shield bow, I can't remember the name of it, the claw thing that bruisers used to get that gives like the big shield. Let me just look it up. What is that dumb thing? Sterix. So they've nerfed Sterix. They've just nerfed everything with shields on it at this point. So I just don't think you're going to see that a lot. But if you're versus something like a Karma or a Janna or a Emilio, maybe Ghostblade. Now this is going to be the big one on a lot of champions. It's got 10 more. It only costs 100 more gold than Umbral. It's got 10 more AD on it. And 3 more lethality. It doesn't have ability haste, but 10 AD is a lot. And then you gain pretty much a permanent 40 movement speed out of combat It's just like coming with, it's not quite mobility boots, but Jesus, you're fast with this. And you can activate it even in combat on a 45-second cooldown to gain 20% bonus movement speed. That's insane for like running people down, running away from stuff. Just an incredibly powerful item. It's already really popular. I think this is just going to put it over the edge. Especially just look at like ADCs. You know, some of them are going to have to build Infinity Edge. It's like 3,400 gold. This thing's only 27. Like, even just 100 or 200 gold on items can really, really break a meta. And this thing is significantly lower than most other carry items now. And it's doing basically not quite double damage, but like the lethality is so much more powerful now than it was, especially on supports, because you don't get to a very high level of supports typically. So that first item Umbral on something like Pike or Senna, you're really going to be like noticing some big hits. Different. This is a new one. Opportunity, so you gain 55 attack damage, 18 lethality, 5% movement speed, so just a little bit under Ghostblade on the attack damage, same lethality. You get the movement speed though, which, I mean, the other one kind of gives movement speed. But after you're out of combat with champions for 8 seconds, you gain 5 lethality. Now, I assume that probably scales based on level, so it might be even higher, I don't know. And it lasts for 3 seconds after you deal damage to champions. So this is like your big ticket, like, destruction lethality item. And then after a champion dies, within 3 seconds of you damaging them, you gain 150 decaying movement speed for 1.5 seconds. So I think this is supposed to be a replacement for Dustblade. There is no more Dustblade, so you don't have that untargetability, really annoying aspect of it. But you've got a lot of movement speed to run everybody else down or to run away, whatever you need to do. So I think this is probably balanced a lot better. It feels more assassin-y. Just to kind of make up a word there. But it feels like it's more on theme with assassination. But the flat lethality, I don't know how much that's going to scale. If you get up to like 10 extra at level 16 or something, or level 18 maybe, that's a lot. That's a lot. So you don't have the proc damage anymore, but all of your abilities are going to be doing, 5 to 10% more damage. So that's probably what you're going to get. As a support, it's most likely just going to be Umbral, Ghostblade, and then you're going to be out of gold. Maybe you get lethality later in the game. You do have a couple utility options. You got Edge of Night if you're afraid of getting hooked or something on like a Senna. That's an option. They did add Voltaic, Cyclosword or whatever. This is more expensive. It's 2,900 gold. It's similar stats to the 2,700 gold stuff, but you do proc damage now for 100 bonus damage, and it slows people a little bit. So this is kind of a replacement for I can't remember the name of it. Storm Surge, Storm Seeker. I can't remember. The ADC item that people get that I think has been a little overrated, but this is that where it like adds the slow. You do get energized faster, so I guess that's cool. This thing. Oh, they still have Storm Razor. Okay, that's what I was thinking of. Why do they have both of these? There's like almost the same thing. Okay, so you gain, this slows, and then you gain movement speed. This also increases the speed that you energize, which they used to have that on a different item. I don't remember. I thought it was on Rapid Fire at one point. I can't remember. But I guess, are you going to be able to do an energized build? I don't know. Like, they did nerf static, where it doesn't scale with AP anymore. This does not have crit chance though. These other ones do. I don't know. It's weird. I thought they replaced Storm Razor. So Storm Razor is 200 more gold. You get attack speed instead of lethality. I'd rather have the lethality, honestly. I guess you get ability haste instead of crit. It's just weird. Like, why would this synergize with? I guess so that you just do more damage more often with energized attack. So I don't know what you're going to combine this with. Maybe it just doesn't combine with other things. Maybe you get this and Storm Razor on some champs. I'm not sure. Maybe Fleet. Maybe you get this on Jhin, like lethality Jhin with Fleet Footwork. Fleet is an energized thing. I don't know. It's weird. Hubris, probably situational. I don't think you'll see a ton of that. I could be wrong though. 100 damage is pretty decent, although it doesn't scale. Hubris, 60 attack damage, 18 lethality, haste. This is 300 more gold than like Ghostblade and Opportunity. I would probably rather have those two, honestly. But after you already get a kill, then you get 10 plus 1 per statue for 60 seconds. So you can reapply this, and you'll keep. I don't think it keeps stacking. Like if you kill 3 people, you're not going to get like 33 or whatever. It's just going to reapply the buff, and you'll get 11. You kill somebody else, you get 12. You kill somebody else, you get 13. So that's like 35 extra gold value each time. But just think about it. You're going to have this at like. Well, I don't know. I guess it does come with baseline 10. So that's 70. I guess it's. After you get a kill, it's going to be slightly more cost efficient, not including the passives of these. Something like that. I don't know. I don't. You probably won't want this. I don't know. 60 seconds is a long time for the extra, like, 10 plus AD. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You don't lose the statues if you die. So that's cool. You've got Axiom Arc, basically the same thing. This does a lot more damage. That's going to be really good on champs where the ult matters. Collector, obviously extremely good on any AD carry is going to be rushing this. You probably don't want this on Pyke. Maybe. Probably not, though. I don't think he cares about crit as much. Senna, though, this could be really good as like maybe a second or third item on Senna. And then obviously this is going to be like the go-to item. One of the big reasons that you would build lethality on something like a Samira, Misfortune. Really good on Misfortune because you get so many chances with your ultimate to get the last tick so that you get the execute. So basically you get to KS your team so they don't take your kills in a team fight. But okay, let's go ahead and get into the actual tier list now that I've spent 35 minutes kind of updating everybody. So where I am so far, and again, this is like, maybe I'm overvaluing the lethality, but I think it'll probably look something like this. I think that Pyke is going to be up there. Now, I'm still lost. Let me just go ahead and exit out of this so we don't have to hear this in the background any longer. But Pyke is already pretty good. I don't think his win rate is like super high, but it's not super low either. The thing that I really like about Pyke, he's similar to Rakan in his mobility, right? Where he has really high base stats too. So he's got like 670 and 45 armor. That's like tank level armor early on. So, good luck ganking him and killing him. He's really hard to kill early on. He also has, the invisibility and the movement speed up with his W. He's got the E to get away from stuff. He's probably the hardest support in the game to lock down and kill. He's certainly in the conversation because of the tankiness plus the other thing. And he has lots of healing in lane too. So, and he not only obviously has high base damages and likes lethality, but he literally scales directly with lethality on a lot of his other abilities. Right, so lethality helps the amount that he heals early on. It affects how fast he goes when he goes invisible by quite a significant amount, right? Remember, you're getting the full lethality now. So you get one lethality item. I mean, heck, even just getting a serrated Dirk, that's 10%. That means you're going to be moving 15% faster here. So instead of 40%, you're going to be going 55% with your Ghost Water. And you get 2 lethality items, you got like 30 lethality, that's going to be, 85, 90%. He's going to be zipping real fast. And you do extra damage on lethality with your E, extra damage with lethality on your ult. So he just really, really loves lethality. He's got the sustain in lane. He's got really good ganking, really good escape, really good vision control, especially with Umbral. He's probably the best vision control support in the game. Because he can place wards deep, he can get away if people try to go for him, and he's got that Umbral advantage. Versus Senna has Umbral, but it's more difficult for her to place those deep wards. So, very tanky, hard to gank. Obviously, has a really good engage with his Q. You have to get used to it because it does have a bit of a wind up. But it's got pretty good range. On it. It's relatively cheap, so it is spammable. On a pretty low cooldown, only 10 seconds. So you can fish for these things quite a bit, and it's pretty fast. So it's got a fairly slender hitbox compared to something like a Blitzhook or a Nautilus, but you can still hit people with it. And it's tricky, but you can pull people over walls with it if they're standing like really close to a wall. So pretty good overall. Has pretty high damage, nice scaling on it. Obviously, you've got the gank tools that I mentioned before. You got a stun, and then his signature ultimate. There's going to be a lot of damage going on in the game. There's going to be a lot of squishy on squishy, assassin on assassin fighting. What does that mean? Lots of opportunities for this ultimate, especially on champs that don't have a ton of mobility, and that's probably going to be a lot of the best ADCs right now. If you think about like Misfortune, Draven, Samira, a lot of these champs are not going to have a ton of dashes to be able to avoid the Pyke execute. There's not going to be stopwatch anymore in the game. Hallelujah. So they're not going to be able to stopwatch your ultimate. And you're probably not going to be facing as many like Ezreal as you might face some. Maybe the meta adapts and people start going like a tank Ezreal kind of thing to counter all the assassins. I don't know. But he's going to have a lot of opportunities to catch and kill people with his ultimate. So, and he's got a lot of good things he can buy with this now that's even at a cheaper price. So I think he's going to be great. The only real problem with Pyke is he doesn't have a lot of protection for your team. So I don't know. His base damages are so high. I'd have to see, is it possible to go for some kind of like tanky, supporty type of Pyke? Could you get a Knight's Vow and a Locket or something like that if you wanted to, right? Could you go Umbral into Locket, right, to protect yourself and protect your team? I don't know. I mean, the scaling is pretty good with AD, right? Like 60%, 100% there, but it's not like insane. It's 80% on the ult. So remember, you can't get more health than your baseline health on Pyke, though. So that health is converted over to AD, and I think it's at a fair, it's like at a neutral ratio. So if you're converting 500 gold worth of health, I think it converts to 500 AD. I don't remember exactly, but we'll have to see. So I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to be a very contested pick. It's debatable whether he's literally the number one pick, but I think he'll probably be either tier 1 or tier 2 for sure. He does require a little bit of skill. You got to hit the skill shots. It is very easy to get baited with him and go in. And if this true skill thing actually counts kills, like more than assists for some reason on supports, he's obviously going to be your go-to to get a lot of kills. Because you can do it with a clean conscience, knowing that you're not screwing your team out of goal whenever you get those kills with your ult. Okay, Senna's the other one. Senna's really strong right now. In general, and she's always kind of a weird one because she just ends up getting just very different builds. Yeah, Pyke's already 52%, so he's pretty good right now. And I think she's already going lethality, yeah. So she's already doing Umbral, Ghost. Wow, look at, this is live. So Youmuu's is 3,100, so it's going to be 400 cheaper. Now, it was still 60 AD, like it still has the exact same stats. And you get the 40 movement speed out of combat. Now, you don't get the extra lethality when you open up on somebody. And you don't get the mythic passive. But, dude, I would trade that for 400 gold in a heartbeat. Especially for full power lethality. Man, that's going to be so good. And then, Umbral is a little bit more expensive. So they are increasing the price of Umbral by 300, which is pretty significant. I don't know. Maybe people skip Umbral and just go like Ghostblade and some other aggressive item. But Umbral should be more expensive. Like that sweeper is very strong. But anyways, yeah, she's really good. So a great bully in lane. You have natural scaling built into your kit with your souls. You do have to make sure that you don't get, hit by hooks if you're against hook champions, but especially against enchanters, she's quite good. She just gets to farm souls off of them. You've got fleet footwork to sustain you. You've got your Q to sustain you and your teammate. You've got a lot of mana with presence of mind. Now, I would go for a zombie ward somewhere in here instead of this, especially if you go in Umbral. But yeah, so she can go invisible, help people kind of escape things with her E. She's got the W for a piece of CC, sort of global pressure with the R, scaling with your autos. So it is like an ADC. You do have to position well. You are going to die if you get hit and hooked by a lot of stuff. You're probably not going to be able to get a tanky type of thing. So I think that she's going to be more vulnerable than Pyke. But if you position well and play well, she might be able to contribute more in especially like a front-to-back team fight where people aren't dying instantly and Pyke's not just getting to like chain together as ults. She could be quite strong. So if you're getting constantly camped by the jungler and they have a really good engaged champ, like a Leona, Nautilus, whatever, Blitzcrank, you might just get farmed. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to put her up this high. So I think her ceiling is really high, but it could be matchup dependent. You don't have a lot of ways to dodge something like a Blitz hook. You just have to actually dodge it. I suppose you could rush the item with the little barrier that blocks hooks. But you're going to be taking a pretty big hit to your damage if you do that. So, I don't know. She's the riskier version of my top picks, but I think she can scale really well if you think you can get away with it. Okay, Blitzcrank, not a secret, why he would be on here. He's very difficult to assassinate himself. He does scale pretty well, especially with Frozen Heart, because he actually wants the mana. Most tanks don't have mana problems with their because their hooks are relatively cheap, but Blitzcrank is balanced around having relatively low mana, so he wouldn't mind rushing Frozen Heart in a lot of situations. So pretty good there. Obviously, if he hooks some of these like squishier champs, if people are playing Misfortune, Draven, Jhin, these things without dashes, they're getting rid of Gale Force. They can't even buy Gale Force anymore. So that's going to help Blitzcrank out a lot. He doesn't have to get any aggressive items because it's probably a one-shot anyways, especially if you have a lethality ADC on your team, which you probably will. So, very, very good. Trying to think of... You just have to be able to hit your hooks, but it should be open field. You should be able to do it. Knight's Vow's good on him. Frozen Heart's good on him. Both of those got buffed. You can do Zeke's on him as well, which that might actually be quite good because you pull them in and then you've got that little slow around you and they're almost certainly going to take at least a couple of ticks of that, and that might keep them from being able to run away from you as easily. Because that's a big thing with Blitz is like, obviously he has his hook, he has his knockup, and that's about it. But he does have a very low cooldown ultimate, so you can trigger that slow really well. So man, Blitz is looking good. And he's difficult to assassinate. So again, he has really high base armor. He's kind of fast, really high base damage, can build tanky items and still one-shot. So I think Blitz is looking good. I mean, Blitz might be number one for a lot of elos. I'm going to put Blitz just a little bit ahead of Senna just for that reason, because Senna's going to be so vulnerable to ganks. I might even put Rakan a little bit ahead of her. This is kind of blasphemy because Senna usually matches up really well in a Rakan, but we'll move him over like this. Okay. And then Rakan, as usual, is probably going to be able to thrive almost no matter what. He's very slippery, just like Pyke. He can get really good vision. He can escape ganks. He's very good at gank assists. Has some of the most consistent, gank assists, right? Because you just are, and then you E onto, whoever your other ganker or flanker is, and then you've still got your W for whenever they flash. So it's almost impossible to escape Rakan. With Pyke, you can flash the hook. You can flash his E or whatever. You can kind of outplay it. Rakan is extremely difficult to outplay, especially if he gets to hold his W on the engage. If he just gets to run up to you or E onto somebody else and hold the W, it's very, very difficult to get away from Rakan. And he's so versatile. So he's one of the few champions on this list who can comfortably buy most of the enchanter items and most of the tank items, depending on what the situation is. Right, if you're really far ahead and you just want to apply maximum damage and just snowball on them, you could go for something like a Mandate early on if you want to get that extra burst damage in there. It's like, oh crap, that Zed's 5-0 mid. I need to be able to help out my ADC or make sure I don't die. Okay, I can get Nice Vow early on or Locket to help out with that. Or okay, we've got a really good team fight comp. We've got one or two tanks. We want to go front to back. Their assassin, their Kha'Zix is 0-3, not much of a threat. Okay, I can go Staff of Flowing Water then and just play for the team fights. So, he could get almost any item on the list except for the lethality items pretty comfortably. So I think that versatility, the vision control, the really reliable engage, the sort of hybrid between tank and chanter, I think he's just almost always going to be an S tier champ. Okay. Although, again, there are some bad matchups here, right? Senna's not an amazing matchup. Because she can kind of farm you a little bit early on, and she does a lot of damage later on in the game. Pike, kind of a tricky matchup because you can't really engage on him super well, and it is difficult to peel whenever he goes on somebody else, right? Whenever he lands a hook on someone, it's hard to peel that. Same thing with Blitzcrank. You can personally dodge his hooks, but if he hooks your ADC, not a lot you can do. Although, to be fair, most champs, not a lot you can do if you get hit with hooks. Other than just, like, eat the hook yourself if you're a Leona or, you know, maybe an Alistar or something like that. So, I think it'll be pretty good. Okay, tier down. I think Leona is going to be really good as well, especially with Zeke's. If you get these lethality champions, you just go in. It's going to add that extra little bit of damage, that 250 damage. If they stay in the Zeke the entire time, that is a lot of damage. It applies a major slow to them. It's going to keep them close to you unless they flash out of it. You're going to be close enough to hit them with your Q and additional time. It's going to force people to probably go like Mercury Treads if they want to not die to your chain and CC, which is going to be very helpful if the rest of your team is lethality, right? So if you're one of the only people that has a lot of CC and your team doesn't have a lot of magic damage, it feels really bad to have to buy Mercury Treads against Leona, but that's just what you might have to do. Also might force people to take Cleanse. Again, if they're taking Cleanse, they're not taking Heal, they're not taking Barrier, so that's going to be a bad deal versus a lot of these assassins out there. So I think it's just going to put teams in a pretty weird spot to try to deal with her, especially if she gets ahead, you know, with like a Draven or a Misfortune or anything like that. The bottom lane's just not going to be able to step up to the wave. On the flip side, why is she not S tier then? She could be. She very well could be S tier. But the one reason that I hesitate is it's pretty rough if you fall behind, right? And if you get camped and ganked as Leona, she's very easy to bait. If you go in with your E and the jungler comes out of the bush, you're probably dead, right? Unless you can fight your way out of it, maybe. But you have no escape. You have no reverse gear. You have nothing to help you with vision control. You're pretty much dead if you go in at a bad time. So you have to have a really good sense of where people are. You have to be paying attention to that mini map. Kind of have, you know, good vision control, or at least a good understanding of where the jungler is. So it's really easy to get into trouble with Leona, but she is one of the best aggressive support options. Janna I have up here just because it feels like Janna can always find a way. She's one of the only enchanters I have just because if she's played well, if you use your tornado to stop a lot of the engage, and you are able to scale up and you know, get things like Staff of Flowing Water to help out your team, or Ardent Sensor, or whatever. If you can get away with it, she's going to be really good. And really, just the way that her kit functions, you probably could still get something like Locket, Knight's Vow on Janna, you know, get stuff to help protect your ally, and still be okay. Because you've still got your displacement from your tornado, you still have your ultimate that pushes people back and has a really high baseline heal. You've still got the movement speed to rotate around the map and to help your allies out when they're moving towards you. You can still activate stuff like Solstice Slay really well. You could take something like Guardian on her to give you some additional protection if you want. Like, she can use Aerie, but Guardian with Font of Life, Revitalize, all that can be pretty good too. Take Conditioning. So that's how she was back in the day. Before they invented the plus healing and shielding items in season, I think they made that a stat in season 7 or 8. That's how you did it. She was one of the number one supports for a really long time in solo queue, just getting stuff like Frozen Heart and Locket, and she was still good. She just, you know, she's still good, but she can get outscaled by things like Soraka because plus healing and shielding is a stat now. But is it? With Morello being so strong and with being able to completely delete stuff like Soraka, the plus healing and shielding items might just be a bait a lot of times. And they have been nerfed somewhat. So I don't know. Maybe like a tank Janna. Like, not in the troll sense of getting like Randuin's, but just like the supporty sense where you're getting Frozen Heart, Knight's Vow, Locket, things like that. Maybe you can sneak in one enchanter item, right? Maybe you don't rush Staff of Flowing Water if the Kha'Zix is 3-0, but maybe you can get Locket first and then get Staff second or third. So I don't know. Maybe she's going to be good. Typically, she's best at sort of peeling hyper carries, but don't forget that she's the only ADC that gives out raw AD, right? So whenever you shield somebody with your shield, you're giving them, you know, 30 plus scaling flat AD, not attack speed, flat AD. So if you give that flat AD to someone who has lethality, right, you're giving that AD to Draven, or you're giving that AD to Kha'Zix or whatever, they're going to hit like a truck. Um, so that is something potentially that could make her a little bit better than things like, Lulu or Renata or these other things that give attack speed. Just the fact that she's giving the AD on a lethality user or on a lethality like caster like a Zed or a Talon or something. So it's going to amplify all of their abilities, not just their auto attacks. So anyway, she could be good. She very well might be S tier, but it's risky. If you're going to play her, I would probably play her tank. At least one or two tanky items. I would not go Glass Cannon Janna. I think you're going to get walloped. I mean, maybe you could go Moonstone because it has health on it. Moonstone into something like Locket. You know what? That actually might be pretty nuts. I didn't think about that before, but with Moonstone increasing like all shields by like 40%, combining that with Locket, maybe that's crazy. I don't know if that affects abilities though, or like affects items, or if it just affects like your abilities. But that might be an interesting build. I'll have to try that out. Locket plus Moonstone. You can do that. You can't do that on live, but maybe we can do that in the preseason. Okay, Maokai's another one, and I know we're almost out of time here. I don't want this to be much longer than an hour if possible. Maokai has vision for the bushes, which is nice. Those saplings can trigger Solstice Slay really easily, which is cool. And just his flash W is impossible to outplay. Pretty much, right? Like in bot lane, you're gonna get got, you're gonna die if he flashes on you. The tank items, something like a Zeke's is going to be very good. He's going to be able to hold people still a lot easier. He can trigger Font really well. So, I don't know. He could still be really good, pretty undervalued. Obviously, his ult can be extremely valuable. You just have to be careful. If you get camped, you're probably going to die if they get around behind you. Sort of like Leona, you don't have any escapes. I guess you can like W onto them, sort of like Leona can kind of do that, but you're probably dead if you pick the wrong fight. Okay, and then Nautilus, he's the squishiest of kind of the major tanks here. His base health, his base armor is a little bit lower than the other ones. His shield is somewhat wimpy compared to some of the other defensive steroids, but he has a really big hook, which is great for starting open field fights, and he can use it to escape if you have to. Obviously, the ultimate is going to be a very reliable piece of CC. Zeke's is probably going to give him a much needed additional boost in damage to convert those kills. So he still could be good. Frozen Heart could be a good item on it as well. He kind of likes mana, spamming his E. If you max E, I think a lot of people have been maxing Hook, but if you max E instead, that can be pretty mana intensive, but it does quite a bit of damage in team fights. So I don't know. Maybe Nautilus makes a comeback here. Okay, and then the other ones that I kind of have the other enchanters down here that could potentially be good. Again, I think the key here would be you're likely going to want to get some kind of tank items. So you want to pick some of them that have high like baseline utility or high baseline heals. Just something that doesn't rely on pure plus healing and shielding, I think. First of all, Morello's really good, like we mentioned before, at Grievous Wounds. It's 2,200 gold. A lot of mages might get that just for the 90 ability power on 2,200 gold, especially if they're up against anything that heals whatsoever. Maybe they get that. But you just have to be able to survive the assassins, right? Zed or Talon just running at you, or you need to be able to survive at least 2 axes from Draven or whatever. So, who would that be? I think, again, Janna is probably the best one. Maybe something like Lulu. She doesn't have great scaling anyways with plus healing and shielding. You could, your ultimate plus Locket plus Polymorph is pretty good against assassins. It's going to be hard to get through that. You can't have really high mana costs either, because those tank items, aside from Frozen Heart, don't have mana on them. So that's another thing. Maybe you have to get Frozen Heart for the mana. Maybe you could get a tier. I don't know. But maybe Lulu, if you have a Jinx or some really powerful auto attacker. Maybe you could go Ardent and then tank. She really wants Ardent, and she really wants to be with an auto attacker, because your picks that you give to somebody plus your W is just so much extra attack speed and on attack damage. But could you go something like Knight's Vow? Her base stats are pretty low. She can't really like peel or escape as well as Janna can. I think it's a reach on Lulu. Maybe Renata. Renata can engage. Ult's good. Obviously, the revive can be good in some situations. Doesn't scale super well with plus healing and shielding. Maybe Emilio. I'm not really sure. Probably not Sona. I don't know. Second move Sona over. Nami is good at clapping people early on if you get Mandate and you feel like you're not going to get blown up. We'll have to see how it plays out. I still feel like Janna is probably the best candidate if you want to run an Enchanter, but still take a tank item or two. I think she has the most like baseline effectiveness just because her Tornado and her ult don't rely on any sort of stats to be effective at like displacing people and peeling, and that she's fast. So, I don't know. Maybe Melio. I don't know. I would probably just stick with Janna if that's what you're going to do. Maybe Seraphine. I do think the final note that I'll say is I feel like Brand and Zyra are going to be a little bit weaker and already closed out of the thing, but they're getting rid of Demonic Embrace, and Leontrys doesn't have any mana on it anymore, I don't think. So it's going to be really hard for them to make it. Now, they do have a lot of high baseline damage, so it is possible that they could still just completely wreck people in lane. But I think their itemization got a lot worse. They made Banshees over 3,000 gold. Zanya's is over 3,000 gold now. The only item that's suspiciously like really cheap is Proto Belt. It's like 2,500. It's kind of weird. It doesn't have mana on it. It has HP. But like, who wants that as a support? You know what I mean? Obviously, something like a Diana maybe, but like on a support, like you get a little bit of damage, but you usually don't want to be running towards them as Zyra or Brand. So I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so other champs to kind of keep an eye on that could potentially be good. Obviously, Thresh, high skill cap, low stats though for a tank early on, pretty low armor. His HP is okay. He can help people, obviously, with Lantern escape stuff. I feel like traditionally it's kind of a bad matchup into most of these top tier champs. But if you out like the Leona's kind of a skill matchup. Blitz is a terrible matchup. He just out damages you. It's really, really bad. Blitzcrank is a very difficult matchup. I feel like Nautilus is probably a pretty difficult matchup. Pike's probably hard. So, I don't know. You could maybe make Thresh work. Bard, if you're able to roam around. They did add more openings in the bot lane, so it's going to be easier to get in and out of the jungle from both sides. So that is helpful for collecting your chimes and not missing out on too much XP. So that's good. They did lower Frozen Heart. He does like that. You do, because that is an item that he's traditionally, bought. And then they have that cheaper movement speed item. Maybe. I think he's going to get lit up by a lot of the top picks, but he is sort of like a champ that builds tank-ish and has like a pretty good engage, sort of high baseline HP. He's a weirdo. We'll just have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. A lot of it just depends on how well you roam and your timing for getting the chimes and all that stuff. Tarek is another one. Obviously not going to die to Assassin. Scales really well with armor. I just feel like it's really hard to engage and force fights with him, but maybe with something like Solstice Slay, that could allow you to give you that sticking power to get in somebody's face and just keep autoing and just like land your ult and sort of force a fight. I'm not really sure. But anyways, okay, that's going to be it. I said I didn't want to go too much over an hour, but hopefully this gives you some things to think about. This is the most changes possibly ever in League. I think it's right up there with Season 8 when they changed all the runes and masteries and introduced like new items. I think it's on that level, and it might be even higher because they're removing so many items. They're removing the mythic system. I think it's going to be great. I think it's a lot of time for experimentation. A lot of things can be potentially really good. And I think so much of it's going to be matchup dependent. If people find stuff that counters the lethality champions well, if people start playing a lot of tanks and somehow those are better, um, in other roles, and maybe the enchanters do get a little bit better. But right now, this is how I think we're probably going to open up. But we'll see. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you've had success with if you're watching this after the season started. Come by, check out the stream. We'll be trying out some different things. We'll probably be playing Recon, but we will also be trying out some other things too. But that's it. Thanks. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.